So, why am I talking to you through your computer or phone or whatever you happen to be watching this on? This is a technique called flipping the classroom, and it simply means that instead of spending class time lecturing and expecting you to do exercises at home, instead I'm lecturing this way and we'll do exercises in class where we can talk about it and go through it a little bit more intensively. Take good notes as we go through this thing and pay attention, especially towards the end. Now, the internet has been great for a good many things, but one of the key problems for media professionals such as yourselves is that it's very tempting to look at a page or two of a Google search and assume that you have all the information you need to know about a given subject. One of the things we try to teach folks is to get beyond the obvious sources to develop a much more nuanced picture of the world around us and the stories that we're trying to write. In this video, I'll cover how to use a bunch of different web resources to find information that you need. It's critical to understand that you would not be expected to copy and paste anything you find from any of these sources. Instead, make sure that you attribute anything properly that you use in a story, but otherwise use this for research and background information to discuss with the sources that you discover. Also, I'll be including some notes later on this semester about what to do with this information once you find it. So, some of this is going to be obvious. You can get a great deal of information from social media. Google is your friend as long as you know how to use it properly and know some of its sub-resources that can be put to your disposal. And then as students at UGA, you have access to several very useful resources such as Newsbank and Newspaper Resource Plus. Also, when you get out into the real world and have to gather information, it's quite likely that you'll be using LexisNexis and Factiva, which are two other news databases. But unfortunately, the versions that UGA has are pretty much useless, so I would not recommend them for anybody. But now, as an example, let's say that you want to write a story about sexual assault on college campuses. I know this is a very emotionally charged topic and may be a little too personal for some, but I bring it up because it's a very important topic to be thinking about and also because I'm doing some research on it right now, so it was top of mind. I had a lot of resources at hand to put this video together. So when you're starting to do a search to familiarize yourself with a particular subject, you need to think in terms of search terms. You can't just go to Google and type in, I want to know more about sexual assault or whatever. Instead, you come up with the keywords you think are most likely to be part of any story that you're trying to find. So in this case, let's take sexual assault, campus, and college. You might possibly want to add in rape and university to make sure, but we're going to stick with these three for now. So in terms of Google's resources, the first and most obvious, of course, is just to Google something. And if you type in a Google search into your menu bar that says sexual assault in campus and college, you come up with some good resources. You have something from the Center for Public Integrity, you have this big piece that Time did, you have other packages done by other media organizations, and you see links to news stories, which we'll talk about here in a second. But then you keep going through, you find other stories, and you find a lot of organizations that are providing information and advocating on the subject. So this can be a really good place to start here. The next thing you need to know about are these Google News stories. And you have these things, and you could click on more news for sexual assault on campus or college campuses, or click up under here under news. And what you see happens that it sends you to much more recent stories about things that are going on right now. One thing to pay attention to is how it's sorting things. If you look here, it's actually sorting things something by relevance. So this is January 5th. It goes back to December 31st, January 10th. So be careful and make sure you are getting the information you're looking for, whether it's the most important or the most recent. Then the other Google resource you can use is Google Scholar. This is something I use a lot when I'm doing academic research, but it can be a great source for you to find sources and scholarly studies on whatever subject you're looking at. So if you type in scholar.google.com and use the same search term that you have up here, now you're starting to see books and authors and particular issues like the role of men, and actually in a couple of different places. And you can see issues like alcohol and related sexual assault, what universities are doing about it, health and behavioral consequences of binge drinking, which I'm sure talks about sexual assault, other issues about the role of men. And one thing to notice particularly here is to look at the number of citations that each of these things get. Obviously, the more cited it is, that's a pretty good indication that the better, or at least the more popular it is. So that's something good to keep in mind when you're going through these. The next thing to talk about are social media. Now, you guys are avid consumers of social media, I am sure, and we'll talk a lot more about producing and using social media to find experts and things like that later this week and later this semester. But let's also think about using social media for research. And here are a few quick examples. First, if you go to Twitter, and there's the search bar that you can use up at the top of the page, and then it will search, and let me click here on all to see what everybody is saying and not just the biggest searches. We have an issue about Phyllis Schlafly, who apparently said something like there were too many women on college campuses and that's why sexual assault was an issue. Some other people throwing out ideas from Maine. This guy looks like he might be a state legislator or something. Things about conservative authors, which is probably the Schlafly thing again. And then we have other issues here and some other sources and things that are being put together. So that's a good place to start. But then also, Facebook itself can be a good resource. And it's not quite organized to search as easily. But if you type in sexual assault, as you see I already did the search, sexual assault college and campus, then you get an awful lot of posts from the New York Times. You see another package that they've put together. Nancy Hogshead Makar is a friend of mine who is an advocate about rape on college campuses. She is a 3-time Olympic gold medalist who herself was raped as an undergraduate at Duke. And then stories by the Chronicle of Higher Education, another project done by student journalists at Ohio University, which I think I want to go back and check out sometime, and so on and so forth. Then another thing I want to show you quickly, going back into the Google ecosystem, I guess you would call it. You know, I know a lot of you all don't use Google Plus and thinks it's kind of silly, and frankly, I don't find it very useful most of the time. But when I'm looking for experts or specific information, I do go to it because a lot of media organizations post stuff there, and it's a place to find experts on a lot of different topics. So if we do the same search on Google Plus, it will come out here, and you see the story that has come up a couple of times about the man with autism. We have this Phyllis Schlafly point here, and then we have issues from Ohio State here. Some other issues around, story from NPR, some issues about how victims feel they've been treated by their schools, and so on and so forth. So you can see there's some overlap with a lot of these things, but there's also a lot of original information on all of them, and that's why it's best to go through everything when you're doing your research on a particular subject. Then I don't think it's very likely that we're going to find anything on this topic on Pinterest and Instagram. But if you're doing other searches, they're definitely going to be valuable. If you're interested in food, for example, there's a ton of restaurants. I think pretty much every restaurant in Athens at this point is on Instagram. And Pinterest is a great source of information on fashion and design and other things like that. So don't ignore things that you don't happen to use, because often there can be very valuable people who know a lot about a particular topic who use those resources more than you do. But then beyond this, because you're students at UGA, you have access to a wealth of information through the library. And sometimes I bring classes up to the library for information sessions, and sometimes I don't. But it's really important to know what you can find up there. And I would also always encourage you, if you're having trouble finding information about a topic, if you don't talk to me, go talk to the librarians up at the main library. And Amy Watts in particular is the Grady College librarian. And she's a wonderful help, and she's always happy to help out with whatever projects I have or my students have. So if you go to libs.uga.edu, this is the page you're going to see. And what we want to look for are the really deep databases of newspaper articles that don't make it out to the web or vanish for the web for whatever reason. And the way to get to that is through Galileo up here, Galileo at UGA. You click on that. About half of your screen is going to look at like this. And what you're going to want to do is go all the way down to looking for a specific database. And I made a mistake here on the slide. It should actually be Newspaper Source Plus. But if we go to this page, and we go down here and we type in Newspaper Source, oops, need a space there. Then here we go, and we have access to this database, which is maintained by a company called EBSCO. And when this comes up, it's going to have a very simple search dialog. Oh yeah, that's right. We also have to log in because if you are off campus, you'll just have, or actually whether you're on or off campus, I think you'll have to use your UGA ID. So I'll click there, and I think it's going to make me do this again. Yeah, so just do that in again. And of course, because I'm using my own computer, I've got my password saved. Don't ever do that on computers in the MLC or whatnot. But then you have this dialog here. And what we want to do, first of all, is expand this box to give ourselves some more options. So let's click Advanced Search. And now we'll put in our 3 terms again. And college. And also, you can, just as a point, you can use these things if you know a particular author you're looking for, or if you're looking for journal articles or other scholarly resources that have subjects or keywords, and you can use those. But this will do for now. You can also restrict by date or other things like that, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So if we search here, we come up with 1,200 different news articles. And you would never want to go through and read all 1,200 news articles. You know, that's just going to be overkill. So from this, you would start to read a few and start to think about what particular angle you want to take on this and start to look for articles that are specific to that issue, about the role of alcohol or what happens at bars or the roles of programs like getting friends to take more responsibility, getting men to take more responsibility, or stepping up criminal penalties for acquaintance rape or things that schools are trying to do. So once you get into those sorts of issues, you can start doing these same searches for other key terms. But also, like before, these are listed by relevance. So they might not really be the articles that you want if you want to find out what's been written more recently. So you can change this and say this is your sort options. So let's say we want to sort by date newest. And we come up with immediately an article about University of Oregon and their basketball coach being sued over sexual assault. And that has been another big issue, is athletes who are guilty of sexual assault on campus. So you can see other issues there, and there seem to be a lot of actually athletic stories right now going on. So that might be something to pursue. The other resource to look at is Newsbank. And what you would do is go back through the same process and go back to the same page. But when you enter on Newsbank, this is a little tricky, but UGA has kind of a weird subscription to this service. What you would want to do is to click on African news, or basically when you click on Newsbank, you get the choice of African news or Latin American news. It doesn't matter, but what you should do is click on African news, but then click on Home up in the top left-hand corner. And that's going to give you a wide range of options. Then, among those is to click on Georgia news sources, because it's smart enough to know that you are in Georgia. So if you use those terms and click on Georgia resources, then at some point here, it will come up with, here we go, another 1,200 stories just from Georgia. 1,200 must be a magic number or something. But then, again, this is most recent matches first, so you know that. But again, just to show you Newsbank a little bit more, you have these shortcuts to World News, USA News, Georgia News Sources, etc., etc. So if you went to World, that's where you would be able to look at other places. But right here, you can see an issue Kennesaw State, you can see something going on at Dalton, something in Forsyth County, and so on and so forth. But what's really great about this source is that it also gets you to campus newspapers. So if you're looking to see what the Red and Black or the Emory newspaper or the Georgia Southern newspaper is writing about the issue, then you've got all of that right here as well, and that's a big help. Now, what's the point of all this searching? You need to know more than what's right in front of your eyes. You have to see what's been written before, and you have to immerse yourself in the world that you've chosen or been assigned and understand what the conversation has been about that world. And you need to know who knows more about this than you do, and to mine those resources by reading their stuff or getting in touch with them or whatever it might happen to be. Then, as you are going into your stories, you need to have a plan A and a plan B. Your plan A for your story should be something ambitious, a really big story, a really important story about the topic that you want to write. Something that you can do if you get all the right sources and all the right interviews. And your plan B should be something you absolutely know you can pull off so that you have a fallback. You never want to have to go to your editor or your professor in this case and say, this fell through and I just don't have anything. Sorry. That doesn't work very well from a grading standpoint, but also an employment standpoint, that's a really good way to get fired. You always have to have something in your back pocket in case plan A blows up in your face. So for this particular topic, I have a slightly sneaky homework assignment. I want you to come up with a story idea, either based on the searches we've just done on campus sexual assault, or on another topic if you prefer. Do a little brainstorming and then look in these sources, social media, the Google resources, and the advanced databases shown here, to see what you can find in terms of what's been written before. Write me up a quick summary as a Google Doc and share it with me. It should include the following: 1 or 2 sentences about what the story is, 2 things you learned about the story from looking through these resources, and 4 sources, either individuals or organizations that you found through searching, who could tell you more about this story. It's due Friday at 2 p.m. Let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.